we go.
There you go.
Record this. Looks like we got 7 people in the waiting room, so I'm gonna get them in now.
Good to see you, John, by the way.
Yeah, same. Where are
Yeah.
you these days?
New York.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Welcome, Tamika. Welcome, Simon. Welcome, Blake. Welcome, Casey. Great to have you guys all here. We can kick things off here. My name is William Butler, and I work on the membership team here at L Suites. Before we get started here, would love to hear from some of you in the chat. If you don't mind just throwing in your name, your title, company, and where you're calling in from, it would be that'd be super helpful for us to see.
I'll start. Simon Kraus, General Counsel, Wavelengths Technologies LLC, calling in from Broomfield, Colorado.
Great to have you, Simon.
Thank you.
I don't know if we have time to go around in a circle here, but if anybody else wants to chime in, feel free to throw it in the chat. And then I wanted to give a big thank you to John Orta for joining this call. We'll run through some questions with him, but first I'm going to throw it over to one of our co-founders, Greg Rayton. Greg is a former GC himself, so he's going to give a little bit of a background on why he originally started the L Suite community, and then we'll dive into some questions with John.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, William. Nice to meet you all. Apologize for starting a little late here. I was telling these guys I got a call right before this and ended up getting sucked into something. But appreciate you all being here and Friday evening, I guess, for anyone on the East Coast. My name's Greg. I'm co-founder of the L Suite Tech GC. I used to be a general counsel. I sort of spent a number of years at a couple law firms, Latham and then Gunderson, and then moved in-house to some venture funds. I was at 500 Startups as the GC, West Coast-based accelerator and incubator model as their first GC for a couple years, and then moved to First Mark Capital, which is a Series A venture fund in New York. Been in New York ever since. So this was something I started with my co-founder Kieran, who was also a general counsel. He was a Series A at a Series A fintech company. We started this as a side project back in 2015. The idea behind it was really just, being a GC is hard. I think it's a really tough job. I think it's sort of, at least my own personal journey, the idea of that first move from a law firm to in-house was a really, really steep learning curve. And I was a corporate lawyer at a law firm, and then suddenly I'm in-house and I need to know, for me, it was like fun work, but, it was like employment and tax and IP. And I got asked to help with like a, personal wealth type stuff and all these types of things that were just like a constant stream of things coming across your desk. So Kieran and I were always talking about that, and she's like, man, this is really hard. And so much of what we do is not competitive. It's really just like the basics of how do you deal with some of these issues? How do you manage difficult founders or investors? How do you manage a board? How do you put in place policies? How do you expand offices? So we started to get together some other GCs really focused on venture. So, venture-backed companies and venture funds, and started doing some meetups in New York just to kind of share best practices and get insights from each other. A lot of it was, kind of group therapy in some ways, and, sort of talking to people that understand what you're going through and can offer some insights, or maybe just an ear to listen. And that obviously, sort of seemed to resonate with folks. So we expanded that. And that community has grown quite a bit over the last 10 years. Now we have a community of around 5,000 people in the legal community. So that's, sort of roughly 2,500 or so are general counsels. We have a community called Deputy and another community called Counsel for teams. So now as our members have grown larger and our community scope has grown larger, we have quite a few large teams that will get their deputies and counsel and whole teams into the community. So we created separate communities from the GC one to keep that really curated. We also have a legal ops community that's obviously become a really interesting emerging area. So we do a number of legal ops events, and we do crossover events with GCs and legal ops. So that's kind of, high level what this community does. It's really focused on connecting people with their closest peers. We do that through events. We do tons of events around the country. And then we built a very curated member platform. I think, as we were really thinking about how to add value for GCs. It's, how do we give information and insights in a rapid kind of on-demand way? So we built a member platform with a whole bunch of different resources that we can take you through, but that's something you can sort of like tap into 24/7.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. John, are you ready for me to interrogate you?
I am as ready as I'm going to be. How about that?
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I think we could start just by understanding your background a little bit and how your experience with L Suite started and how it's been overall.
Yeah, it's so nice to meet all of you. I'll start by give you just a quick overview of my background. So I've been doing this tech GC thing for most of my career. I was actually a litigation associate back in the day and went back and got my MBA during like the first Web 1.0 time frame and came out right when the internet totally the first wave crashed. It was like I graduated in May of 2000 from business school. And so went to a company called eLoan, actually not as a lawyer, but as a biz dev guy. And it was there where I became really good friends with the GC. And at some point, he had an opening on his team, and he was like, "Hey, would you consider coming back and being an in-house counsel?" And I really liked him, and I didn't really love my boss that I was working for at the time. So I said, "Yeah." And so it's like those fortuitous connections that you make kind of set me on my way. The guy who was the CFO at Elon became the CFO at OpenTable, and so that was my first GC job was at OpenTable. They were still private, did the IPO in 2009, were public for 5 years, and then we sold OpenTable to Booking in 2014. After OpenTable, I went to Metromile, where I was a GC there. Metromile is one of those companies that people know the founder more than they know the company. If any of you listen to the All In podcast with Chamath or David Sachs, Dave Freeberg, who's one of the four, was the founder of Metromile, and so he was my boss. So stayed there for a couple of years. Metromile also went public via SPAC and then got sold to Lemonade. And then I was at Nextdoor, the social network that people are most familiar are because your neighbors complain about people's dogs pooing on your yard or coyote sightings in the neighborhood. Again, very similar situation. Joined when it was private. We did a SPAC in 2021 um, with the class that hasn't done that well, but it was still a lot of fun. And then about a year and a half ago, I left Nextdoor and joined Whatnot. And for those of you who don't know Whatnot, it's like the live stream shopping platform. So we just raised our Series F like 2 weeks ago, which is very exciting. So you can kind of see the pattern in terms of my career. It's like I end up at a lot of private companies and then hopefully cross my fingers and they do all right.
Well, thanks for the background, John. Super interesting.
Yep.
I guess the next question would be, how do you use Tech GC or L Suite in your day-to-day, and do you have any specific examples of like how that has maybe helped you in terms of scaling private companies?
Yeah, so I was early in what was then the Tech GC, then called Tech GC. I had a lot of friends that were involved very, very early on, like Kristen Sverchek over at Lyft. And she was the one that I think originally connected me to. If you've started this in 2015, I couldn't have been too far behind that, like 2016 or 2017. And what I really enjoyed about it at the time that I actually still think is true today is just the people that you meet. Like, so I'm also a member of, for example, like ACC, which is just a ginormous organization. And I find that I actually just don't interact with it that much. They just don't have a lot of events or ways that I meet a lot of folks. Um, what's been really, I kind of divide in terms of what I get out of L Suite nowadays, it's kind of three buckets, maybe four buckets, depending on how I cut it. Which is one, I use it all the time to find referrals for stuff. Like when I don't know how long you all have been general counsels, but one of the things that I think, Greg, you alluded to was you get all sorts of wacky questions that, regardless of what your background is, you have like literally no idea. And so I always say my number one job is just to try to figure out an answer. And so I am always on the website asking people for recommendations, whether it's like local counsel in Japan or gaming counsel in the UK or some sort of some counsel that can answer my questions about can you sell lobsters across state lines, like whatever, whatever it happens to be. And it's really amazing that actually somebody has dealt with this before, and I usually find a good solution to it. The second thing is the camaraderie. They have the events that you all throw, whether it's the conferences or like the dinners. I think that they're both amazing. The conferences are great to get overviews of like the IPO conference in particular. I really like. I've been to a couple times, even though I've done IPOs, because I just think it's really interesting to look, to kind of continue to see how that develops. But then it's like the small dinners that are hosted throughout the country in various cities. I've just met some really great people through those. I'm going to pause there because now I'm like talking a lot, but happy to dig into any of those if you have follow-up questions.
Yeah, definitely. We will just announcement for the group. We'll save some time at the end. I just have a couple more
Yeah,
questions to get through with John, and then we'll save some time. If any of you have a question for John, for Greg, or just generally about membership, we're happy to dig into those. So three more for you, John. Then
yeah,
I'll let it loose. So your broader team is involved with L Suite too. Do you have any
yeah.
sense of like the value that your team gets from being involved with the broader group?
Yeah, so my whole team is actually also signed up, and that was a good. I thought that was a really smart move to allow deputy GCs and then the councils to also join, because honestly, in some ways, they get just as much, if not more, out of it as you're kind of progressing through your career. The way I think about it is like for GCs, there's just not that many people that you can talk to. Like when you're the GC and you're looking for advice, oftentimes within your own company, like who are you going to ask if you're the big boss? So having the community is really helpful, I think, to get advice on as issues arise. For people who are deputy, what I think it's really great is how do you get to be a GC? Like if I talk to like my number twos, um, that's always their big question, right? Because usually they've come up just like we all have with some sort of subject matter expertise, right? They're either a corporate lawyer, they're a commercial lawyer, they're an employment lawyer, and they need to understand like how do you go from kind of being a deputy GC to being a GC. Um, and for the councils, a lot of the times it's really great for just whatever subject matter they're covering. They will go to events. I was actually just talking to the guy who runs commercial for me. He lives out in New York, and he just went to a dinner in New York. Just I want to say it might have just been yesterday. It was just very recent, and had a great time. And he had a great time because he knocked out some CLE. He met some really cool people. They had breakout groups where they talked about AI stuff, and he just loved it. And it's good to see.
Awesome. And then on that tangent, one of the questions that we got before this call from someone in the audience is how do you or how have you in the past justified hiring additional attorneys from a larger company perspective?
How do I justify hiring more people?
Yeah,
You mean in-house?
yeah.
Yeah. So it's an interesting one. I don't know who. I love that an audience question from the audience. This is great. Um, legal is always the hard one, right? I think traditionally people have looked at legal as a cost center and kind of a necessary evil. Uh, what I have found though is that when you can explain to your CEO, and hopefully your CEO is someone who's intelligent and they will quickly get it, is that legal can be a lot more than just reactive. And so the way that I was partner with the business in general is just say, look, I'm not here to empire build. I am not here to overhire. I am not going to hire somebody before we need it. But I can guarantee you that if when I come to you and I say I do need this person, it's actually going to be one, the business needs it, and two, it's going to be probably a net economic benefit because I'm paying somebody outside counsel fees. So employment's always a really, really good example. Well, actually, the way that this usually plays out is commercial. Like if you don't need if you don't pay outside counsel to review contracts, that's like the immediate win. So you can usually get a commercial person first. I would say employment, if your company gets to my like rule is 700-ish people, and it depends a little bit on whether you're in one state, multiple states, international. At that point, it behooves you to hire an employment person in-house who can just be the point person for all of the things that kind of come up. And you can kind of do that same logic with all of the positions. If you have a heavy IP company, you can probably justify getting an IP attorney on board. It all just really depends on what your company does.
Awesome. Thank you. And then the last one that I had written down for you, then we'll open it up to other audience questions if anybody has any, is how do you justify or make room in your legal budget for L Suite?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty easy one in my book. Like I, the money that you save in terms of I'll use my one example. If someone asks me, I had this come up where I needed to find gaming counsel in the UK. If I can answer that question within, an hour by getting a bunch of referrals from folks within this network, it almost pays, like that by itself pays for itself. Because otherwise you're just spinning wheels. The cost is so worth what your time savings will be, that it's pretty easy to justify to even the most stingy of finance people or CEOs that it's worth the investment. I haven't really not gotten that much pushback at all.
Awesome. Well, those are the questions that we had written down for John. So I would love to open it up to the audience. If anybody is brave enough to unmute themselves and ask John a question, we'll open it up to those.
I love that everybody's brave enough to put themselves on camera, though. That's nice. I appreciate it.
It's got to be me again. You mentioned ACC, which I am a member of.
Yeah.
Um, Everything you've mentioned, I could also run through ACC, right? They've referrals and all the rest of it, and they've got their. And it is big, so you got to find the right spot to ask the question. But
Yeah.
which gets back to the question of how L Suite really differs, other than perhaps more events. I'm getting the sense, and it's a smaller community.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a lot more, although ACC numbers wise, I think it's like a bigger organization. The people within L Suite are much more akin to, at least for me, the issues that pop up in my day to day. And I do think I wouldn't underestimate the in-person events as being a huge benefit to L Suite. So, for example, I just went to a dinner like two or 3 weeks ago here in the city, um, and ended up sitting next to a guy who I've known for a long time, and I met actually through L Suite, just a good guy. But in that dinner, we actually started talking about like how our companies could and should like work together. And it's just hard to find those types of connections in a lot of places. Can you ask where are you based too, by the way?
We're in Colorado. I
Oh,
live in
that's right.
Denver,
You're in
Colorado.
Colorado.
The company's in Broomfield, so between Denver and Boulder, if you
Yeah, yeah,
have
yeah.
the geography down. And I guess my follow up then, and I don't want to monopolize here, is so how many events do you have out here?
That's probably more for Greg.
Yeah, for Greg.
I
Yeah.
actually, yeah, I go to one. I actually have a goal where I go to one dinner a quarter. I don't know how many of it. I mean, you can better answer that.
Simon, I think we did about 5 private dinners in Denver throughout last year, and we have a similar amount planned this year. And hopefully John can attest to this. But usually there's, I would say, anywhere from 15 to 20 GCs
Yeah.
each of those dinners. And we have a tradition of going around the room and introducing yourself. And, if you're willing to share a professional challenge with the group at those dinners, it's a really good place to get feedback from other members too.
Well, thank you both.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in on that just for whatever it's worth. Simon, good questions. One, by the way, I'm from Boulder. I grew up in Boulder and um, love it out there. Yeah, so we try to do at least quarterly events in all of like the hubs that we're in. Some of our bigger hubs like New York, San Francisco, we're doing probably a couple a month, but that's just larger community and people probably go to, one a quarter, I'd say is a really sort of good, healthy amount. Some go to more, some less. Um, I'll just say for whatever it's worth. I mean, obviously, take this with a grain of salt. It's different coming from me than John, but like I was also a member of ACC. I got, some value out of ACC, but the reason we really started this community was that just to me, like ACC just didn't feel curated. Like I would go to that, I would meet, I don't know, lawyer 1000 at, a manufacturing company. And I'm like the general counsel of a small venture fund. Like we have zero in common. And I wasn't really getting much professional value out of that. So we really focused on building a very curated community and really thinking about at the time it was only venture-backed startups and venture funds, like really the venture high growth, you have investors on your board, you're dealing with the board management type of stuff, like those types of issues. The community has expanded over time. And now, we actually didn't allow public companies in. And then we had members like John and Kristen Sverchek and all that who went public. And so we sort of were like, all right, we got to create a public company community. But we did that in a really like curated way. And we continue to do that as the community expands. And the whole goal is really like connecting you with those close peers that you really are in similar situations. You really get that similar value.
I have a quick question. Where are your hubs? I know Colorado, I know New York, California. Where are your other hubs?
Yeah. So where are you based, Mika?
I'm in Michigan, but I get tagged with New York because the company is in New York, but I'm fully remote.
Okay. I mean, we're in most of like the traditional tech hubs, I'd say. I mean, obviously San Francisco, New York, Boston, LA, Seattle, Chicago, Miami, Denver, Boulder, Austin. Um, we do not have events in Michigan. Um, I don't know. I'm trying to think what might be the closest for you. I guess New York,
Chicago.
Chicago. Yeah.
Chicago,
We've
New
also
York,
Yeah.
yeah, either one. Yeah.
also done a couple
Okay. I was
in,
just curious.
in Toronto as well. I know that's
Oh,
Oh yeah.
interesting.
but
About 4 hours. Yep. Okay.
done
Yeah,
three,
we do.
4 there.
Yeah, and I mean, sort of just on the event front, I mean, I think, look, live events have their own magic, and I think there's a ton of value to that. But we do a lot of virtual programming too. I mean, again, like a core thing here, like all of you, I've sat through more than my share of, like law firm webinars. Like that was also part of the model. It's like they were just so dry, and it was just such like a check the box, and like I just, at the time, like we were just like, I don't feel like law firms really understand what in-house counsel do or what they want out of this. Like I'm not looking to deeply understand every nuance of the law. Like that's what I'm hiring you for in a lot of ways. I need to understand sort of like the core issues and how do I think about that? How do I manage this risk? So we really focus on high quality, virtual content as well. And the way we, sort of do that at the highest level is like everything is integrated with a general counsel. So it'll be like John on stage with like Latham talking about some issue they have dealt with, either, not always like Latham's their outside counsel, but like a core really like led by the in-house counsel of the issues that are relevant and how to talk about that. And then all of those, you can either attend them live, but we also have an on-demand CLE platform. So, you can always access them from wherever.
Yeah, and Tamika, my oldest kid went to Michigan undergrad, and my youngest one
Go blue.
is in Interlochen
Okay.
in Traverse City.
Traverse City. Yep.
Yeah,
Go blue.
go blue.
Awesome. Well, I know we're coming up on time here. We probably have time for one more question if anybody wants to sneak one last one in before we wrap things up.
I'll throw one in if I can. So one thing that you pride on the system is that ability to pull the network. I noticed it was a pretty high volume of emails when I did kind of a test look at it, where we're getting a lot of emails that filled up my inbox with all kinds of questions coming from the L Suite group. And really, it's great how responsive people are and willing to help. And I definitely see a lot of value in that. How do members, who might not have time to be able to be as active on reviewing and helping others and being in part of that correspondence, what are the tools and tricks you use to kind of manage that inflow? Because the L Suite network does generate a fair amount of emails, I noticed. So what would be the
Yeah.
what would be the approach on that? Or did you just say, hey, that's why you're here, you shouldn't, soak it up?
No, no, definitely not. So like as a member, you can go onto the member platform. I'd say you could, you can do a daily digest. You can do no emails. You can sort of like manage that volume. I'd say the vast majority of members do a daily digest. And sort of are just kind of like you scan that, you just like you might have a Google group, daily digest or whatever, but like scan that at the end of the day and sort of see what's really just interesting to you, and you can click into that. Some members really do like the real time flow, and either they filter it or whatever, but that's really up to you. Um, you're not you're not the first one, of course. I understand the email volume can be a lot, so we want to make sure that that's kind of a you control that how you want to.
Yeah, I do the digest for what it's worth. Yeah, so I don't, so it doesn't feel that overwhelming because it kind of gets all bunched together. Monica, did you have a question? I didn't want to.
Thank you very much. I don't know if it's a question for you, John, or for Greg, but I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about the crossover you mentioned between the legal ops and the GC universes of L Suite. In particular, just think it's upon us to automate what we can automate, and the landscape is certainly shifting. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you're engaging with members on that.
Greg, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to, and obviously weigh in if you've had any experiences. But so we acquired a community called Link last year, Legal Innovators Network, which was a legal ops network. And they'd done a bunch of sort of local small group events and really good synergy with us. So there's about 1,000 legal ops members, and we do dedicated events for them, similar to how we do it, for GCs and deputies and counsel and whatnot. And then we have quite a few crossover events. So last week, as an example, we ran. This was our first full year with this community, so we created a conference, the Legal Ops times GC conference, that was in San Francisco last year. So it was last week. That was our inaugural Legal Ops GC conference. William was there. You could sort of like talk about it. I unfortunately wasn't able to make that event myself. It was in San Jose. Sort of probably about 50% GCs, 50% legal ops. I think that was the kind of core thing that we were seeing was just, look, like I think a lot of folks go to Clock and maybe some of these other events, but I mean, to me, like legal ops is really a partnership with your GC. Like it's got to be, something you're running together, you're innovating together. And I think the siloed legal ops events are just less valuable in that way. So we wanted to make sure we're really bringing that partnership. We dive into a lot of different types of content. There's obviously, a number of core recommended vendors there, but it's still really about like substantive content, and everything is a combination of all of our conferences are like this. It is some main stage content, which will be dealing with like broad issues that, are highly relevant to probably, everyone or most people in the audience. And then a series of small group breakout roundtables where you get to go deep into certain issues, and you can, generally pick the topics you want to go to on that front. It's William. Anything you want to add since
Yeah, I would say that there was
there?
probably, I think we had around 110 folks that attended that, and I think it was probably 60/40 legal ops GCs, 60% legal ops and 40% GCs. And I think the conversations were just very interesting and mostly around how legal departments are going to be structured in 2026. And it does seem like the legal ops folks are kind of shaping that conversation and taking the heat off some of the GCs, which was interesting to be part of and hear.
Yeah, thank you. Are there other crossover opportunities throughout the years? It mostly once a year conference driven?
No, there's a lot. So all of them, they do these local dinners and whatnot. So, sort of depending where you're based, those are mostly they're in less cities than GC community, but sort of still the same kind of San Francisco, Boston, um, Chicago, LA, the kind of core hubs. Those are all crossover events. So for the most part, we are trying to sort of like uh, create that real cohesion between the two communities. Um, legal ops folks might join webinars and all of that, but there's not maybe as much interaction on that part, but we do quite a few legal ops focused webinars that, everyone's joining.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. For whatever it's worth too, I mean, just throw it at the end. We also have a CFO community called the F Suite, and we do a handful of CFO crossover events, which a lot of GCs find useful as well. So, I think we think about those around maybe different transaction types, like an M&A focused event, and it's, how's GC and CFO working together, or IPO, a number of those types of topics. It's a separate community, but we try to sort of interweave it where it makes sense.
Sounds great.
Cool. Well, thank you all for joining today. I will send you each a follow-up email if you have additional questions for me or Greg. We are happy to answer those. And then, John, thank you again for
Thank you for having me. It's great. Super nice to meet all of you. Hope you all have a good Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Great meeting
absolutely.
everybody.
Thank you all, and thank you, John.
See ya.
Take care.